It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly, so let's realign, just listen and fill your mind.
Hey guys, how is it going? And welcome to the Morning Star Drive on 117.8. It is Wednesday, June 28th, and so happy for you joining us, and we are ready to start another day together with the Lord. So, subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on SoundCloud, and make sure to support us on Patreon. So today we have an exciting podcast for you. We have Health is Happiness with Yuen You from Singapore. We have the Bible word study on translations, and of course, commentaries, updates, and news on what is happening around the world in this history today. All right, everyone, how are you doing? It is Wednesday. We got a service tonight, so hope you guys are really looking forward to it. Make sure to pray for your preachers and make sure that they preach with the fire of the Holy Spirit so that you will feel the inspiration and take action on it right away. If you haven't done so yet, go ahead, leave a like and comment to build our community. Really happy for everyone joining us each and every weekday on the Morning Star Drive. So let's get up and support each other and make sure that we can do this and make this community the greatest community we have in this history. All right, so it is Wednesday, guys. Good morning to everyone. It's already the middle of the week, and we are excited to get up to another day, pray, and really put the words of God into action. Hope you guys are really, this is it, guys. We got like, what, 3 days left in June, which is nuts. We're already going to be in July. This Saturday is July 1st, which is Canada Day. So it is going to be very exciting. Of course, and then a couple of days later is July 4th, which is, you know, the Independence Day for America and stuff like that too. But, you know, Canada comes first because it's July 1st. You know, there's a couple things that are, you know, when you look at the relationship between Canada and the U.S., Canada, we are first. We're better. Why? Because, you know, our independence is like 4 days earlier. We're first, they're fourth, right? So you can take a look at it that way. We're first and they're fourth. On top of that, well, you know, not to make it into a pun, but we are on top of America. We are above America. So just a couple things I wanted to add. Don't want to get you guys all riled up, you Americans out there. Going to be, I can see you guys writing already into the comment sections like, oh, Pastor Sky, how dare you say that? I want to hear it. I want to hear it, especially those of you over there in California in the Valley. It's like, Pastor Sky, how can you say that about us? Like, don't you know, like, we're like the major superpower in the world? I can't believe that you just said that about Canada and us. And I'd be like, all right. I can't wait to hear what you guys write in the comments below because I'll be listening to it with that Valley accent. Either ways, couple days left in the month. Also, today we started a new 21-day prayer condition. And it really feels like it's a different condition. It's a very important one. And I'll give you my reasoning for it, right? My reasoning why it's very, very different for me is that we just finished a 70-day prayer condition. And usually we'll go into another 70-day prayer condition, right? Or maybe up it to like 100, 110. And then once we're done. But this is weird because we went from 70 and now we're down to 21 days, right? So for me, it makes it very interesting because I think it coincides with the possible coming to an end of the trial. Right, Sunset trial is going to be, you know, it is closing up. So it seems like these last 21 days seems to be that last final push to pray for this trial to go well and justice to be served, right? So this condition, let's really make sure that we can fulfill this. I like 21 days better than 70 because it's a shorter term and it allows us to be more, more focused because it's shorter. So that's something I do think it's very, very important, right? So today, it is Wednesday. And I did want to, I got this awesome email from a member, and it's an interesting question, and it's an interesting insight, or what do we do now? Like, yesterday I did talk about, remember during the word study, the practical word study, I did talk about the bitter cup, right? When Sunday message mentioned in the Sunday message, it really resounded with me is not everyone should drink the bitter cup of the man of mission, right? It's just not for everyone. And when you miniaturize it down to us, I talked about, yeah, sometimes some missions are not for us, right? Yeah, it's true. Not everyone is made to be a head leader. Not everyone is made to be a department leader. Not everyone's made to be running full-time in Providence. No matter how much we have the passion and such, not everyone was made to live it for the rest of their lives. Like that's the thing I was saying is sometimes we just don't, if we think with our own thinking, it's just, oh, I have passion, I love God so much, so with this love, I'm going to, become a pastor or whatever, right? And sometimes that's not the right thing to do. Sometimes that passion is given to you so you could be great in business. You could become an external witness. You could become a CEO, a lawyer, an engineer, a teacher, a doctor, someone who's going to be a great example in that area, right? We need people of faith, great faith in every area, in all aspects of life, not just people running full time. Right? So this is the interesting thing. I did talk about this bitter cup, and sometimes we think with our own thoughts that we should be there and that you shouldn't be there. And sometimes we, as leaders, put our own thoughts into who should be the next leader too, because that's sometimes just our own thinking. So the big question that comes up right now is, it's about think about what we have right now. And I'm going to say that a lot of churches and a lot of places will have this type of situation, right? Many countries that are smaller will have this type of situation, right? So even for myself, and I look at many head leaders in the past to even now, many of these head leaders didn't really want to have that position. They're willing to do it for the sake of this history, but it wasn't the one that they wanted. It was kind of like there's a lot of times we're in those situations where it's like, oh, we don't have a leader. We need someone to help head lead. And they ask you or they ask this person, and they, out of the kindness and the fire in their hearts, right? Which I truly commend, because we just don't have, there was no one else to take the position. A lot of times head leaders take those positions because there's no one else. And this is reality, right? And I don't, I'm not pointing at a single country right now, but I know that this is something that happens all the time. Sometimes there's just no one there. And then people are going to ask anyone, like they're just going to ask, oh, well, let's ask this person, this person works hard, this person's a good evangelist, this person's a good manager, this person's something like this. And then they start asking these people, and they're just trying to find anyone to fill in that position who is somewhat in that level without looking at their skill set or if they're really fit for that position. And I understand, like, what else can you do, right? At that point. So I think many head leaders in the past, including myself, I was never someone who was like gunning towards a head leader position. I was at the Lord's church right after the rapture, and suddenly I got a call from America to take a head leader position. Crazy part is, I told them straight up, I've never done this before. I've never done it. And they're like, oh, and I know how desperate they were. Do you know how desperate they were? Like, I'm going to be very transparent right now. What they asked me was, they said, any church you want. Pick a church. I'm a first-time head leader, and they gave me the power to choose any church that I wanted. Isn't that crazy? And, I'm going to tell you right now is, in the beginning, I was really against it. I was like, oh, I don't think it fits me. But eventually I was like, oh, maybe I should do this, right? So I'm going to say that there's, and there's a lot of people in this position who took up head leading, because of that situation, right? They're doing it for the sake of this history. They love this history, and they see that the church needs a head leader, and they know that they are kind of in a leadership position, and they would rather take that burden upon themselves than see it empty and the church suffer. And I say commendable. Very, very commendable, and it's something that happens a lot in smaller countries, okay? Now, what is the second type of person that becomes a head leader, which is more rare to find? And I'll tell you kind of in a little bit later why it's more rare to find this type of person. But this person is someone who has wanted to be a head leader for a while. And they've been training for it. Training for it does not mean going out to evangelize. Training doesn't mean going out to lecture every day. That's not training, right? Head leader is way beyond those things. Like, when I became a head leader, I was like, I'm a good lecturer, I can preach, but there's so many things I couldn't do. And when I finally became a head leader, I'm like, whoa, it's not just this. You don't even have to be the best lecturer. You don't even have to be the best evangelist to be a head leader. You don't, right? And I realize there's a different set of skills that you need to be a head leader, right? And imagine the difference between someone who loves this history. They weren't thinking about head leading, but there's no other choice, but they do it for the sake of this history. They love this history. They love God, and that's why they did it, which is, like I said, super commendable. And it's a situation that comes up a lot. Compared to someone who has wanted to be a head leader, has been training for it by going to school, or I'm going to say, quote unquote, proper seminary, and then becoming a head leader. Those are two different things, right? Because one person has always wanted, and they're gaining the skill set in order for them to become a good head leader. And the other one, say super commendable, they take the burden upon themselves because they love this history so much, but it wasn't the thing that they were thinking they wanted to do, right? Both are great. However, the second one is obviously better. So the question is, imagine for years and years, for let's even say decades, let's say for decades, it's constantly in this type of cycle. Then what happens is, it's like, what the heck? Like, you kind of look at it as looking more and more hopeless. Why? Because it just feels like things are regressing to worse and worse and worse. Doesn't it feel like that? Like, if you're like, whoa, it's been like this for 10 years. It's been like for 20. What is crazy? And if you see it constantly happening like this, you begin to lose hope, right? So there's a couple things that I want to add to this. That these are my thoughts that are coming in here. Now, number one is, this is something that I am a crazy advocate of, and this is something that I've been talking about for a long time. It's just that we got to find the right way to do it, right? But like when we look at people, when we say in Providence, oh, I went through seminary, right? Oh, I'm the 18th seminary. I'm 17th seminary. I'm 14th seminary, by the way. I'm 14th seminary. And I was an advisor for the 17th seminary for someone else too, right? And I'm going to tell you straight up right now, if you said you went to Providence Seminary, that would mean nothing to me. It would mean zero to me, to be honest. Oh, Providence has seminary, but no, they went through seminary, but how come they can't head lead anymore? And and I'm going to respond to you, that is not proper seminary. And please don't freak out, because some of you went through seminary, and you might be saying to me, oh, but it was so good, this, and this. Oh, the words were so great. Maybe we just didn't put it into action or whatever it was, right? Let me give you my personal opinion, this is only my thoughts. So if you're going to get mad at anyone, just write in the comments. I'm the punching bag, so you can just get on me. This is my personal opinion. So don't freak out. You can freak out at me, but I'm not speaking for Providence. I'm not speaking for anyone else. This is just me. Because I went to seminary too. And I'm going to be honest with you, not beneficial. My seminary degree in Providence is just to show people that I went through it. Hey guys, oh look, and people in the world, oh, I went to seminary, oh, I got it. I didn't gain much from it. I'm super honest with you guys right now. Now, does that mean that when AJ was delivering the word at that time, were the words bad? And I'm gonna be, no, the words were good. It just wasn't done in a proper way, like a proper seminary should. Like, for instance, you get one meeting a month, and it's like 5-6 hour lecture. And sometimes there wasn't a lecture, so you had 2 months without anything. No homework. Or if you did get homework, because remember, I was the advisor for the 17th, and there was homework like doing summaries of like the Sunday message or the Wednesday message, something along that line, but it was useless. I'm going to tell you right now, because as the advisor, guess what? It wasn't there to check and give you feedback on what the work that you did. It was just there to check to see if you actually did it. That's not helping. For me, I'm just like, well, what's the point? What's the point of just write anything you want? They're only checking to see if you did it or not. That's it. It doesn't help. Right? And for me, if I were to think about proper training, proper proper seminary school, you need classes like 2 to 3 times a week. It doesn't have to be 5 hours. It could be like 1 hour, 1 hour and a half, like a regular class. 2 of them will be classes, plus 1 is going to be like a discussion group or a training, going over points, trying to put those points into act. Like, that's what real school is to me. That's what it is. And that's, remember, personal opinion. I want the discussion groups. I want a real school environment. And you know what? I think whoever takes that course for head leading, they should be paying like $5,000 per semester or something along that line. They should. They should. Because people will take things seriously when they pay for it. and it shows the value of it too. It's just like exercising. You have a gym at home, you exercise when you feel like it, which is not very often. But you pay like $50 a month, you're going to go to the gym, right? Sometimes every day you'll go. Some people go every other day, but still you're going to use it, right? So here we are in a situation where it's like, I think we're in a bad cycle where, it's hard, it's difficult. Like I said, a lot of churches or countries are in a very, very small position, in a small, what do you call it? It's not a very big, what's that word? They're not very big. There's not a lot of people, right? I understand, right? And sometimes we're kind of looking at the same thing going over and over and over again, where we have, leaders, they'll do it for as long as they can, and eventually they stop, and then there's no one there to take over. Like in 2019, there was a tour that came to America when I was headlining New York. And after that tour, like 3 of us in the 3 largest churches in America, we all stepped down at the same time. There was no leaders take over for like over a year for all 3 of the largest churches, right? So if you think about that, it's like, whoa, that's kind of crazy, right? And what does that mean? Well, what is a possible solution? Okay, so the reason why things become hopeless is because hope is not about the present. You can't lose hope about the present, because the present can be bad, but the hope is about the future, right? And in order for us to really, really be able to tackle these types of situations, it's not about tackling what is happening right now. It's about tackling what's going to happen in the future. So there's a lot of different ways that we can think about it, a lot of different things that we can do. But what would I do personally? Personally, I think one of the big benefits that we have to do is I would set a time. I really would. I'd be like, okay, let's really do this. So what I would do is I would set a timeline. Okay, so what we're going to do is with the current generation of leaders, we're going to, let's put it up that we need this current generation of leaders to take charge for the next 3 to 5 years. So you make a goal. Some people say 3 years, some people say 4, some people say 5. I'll say 3 to 4 years, right? So we set that time of 3 to 4 years, which means it now gives us a deadline of how long we have to raise the next generation of leaders, right? We have to raise these future leaders, really investing in them, really investing, putting the money down for it, not saying paying them. We have to make sure that they can do the right things, making sure that they get all the necessary skills to lead a church, to make a community, not just lecturing and preaching, but organization, structure, marriage counseling, all these things, right? And yeah, the people, a lot of countries will have current leaders. They may not have all the skill sets because we just never had that type of training system, right? But we don't want to get stuck in it again. And we don't want to deal only with the present, or else there's not going to be a future. Because when you only deal with the present, what the problem is going to be is, well, even if they're ready, when they step down, who's next, right? So that's why I would say make a long-term plan, 3, 4, 5 years. Allow things to carry on as they are, but you are preparing for the future. Raising the next generation, getting them ready to lead properly. This is not easy, because this means, and this is one of the things I really advocate for, is a real new seminary training program for lead, real. It's got to be a real program. And what does that mean? It means people are going to have to go out and find a way to make this program work. For instance, if you don't have a program yet, I would make people go out and get their counseling certificates. I would make people go out and get their marriage counseling certificates just to have a start so we know how to do this, right? Or you have a team out there to make a new leadership training program, right? So there's something like that we need to make, and you'll have 3-4 years to do it and train people while you're doing it. Remember, hope is about the future. It's not about the present. Because think about this, when you look at the Sunday message, the great thing about the Sunday message, Sunstein says he says, winter is going to pass and spring will eventually come, and all the blessings you couldn't get at that time, you will get when the spring comes, right? Which means that even though the situation presently is not so great, it's a hopeful message that even though right now is terrible, we have hope because it will pass and the spring will come and people will be blessed, right? We will resolve the future situation. Even if it's not so nice, there is hope if the future situation is being taken care of, right? And, there's going to be a lot of questions that come up now is Well, how would you find the next generation? Most of them don't even want to lead a church. And the answer is, not an answer. This is kind of one of the things that I saw. There's a difference, like when you look at your leaders, you can look at them positively in two different types of ways. Just like I said, there's two different types of leaders that come in. Like there's no one else, but this person loves the history. They're doing it with their own volition, and they really want to see the history of God do well. So they take that position because there's no one else. And then the second type of person is just does it like because they've always wanted to do it. They're training and making themselves right. And there's two different types of people doing it, right? Just like there's two different types of positive comments. One of the reasons why people are not really wanting to become leaders is because there are not many, like, people look at their leaders in a positive way, but sometimes they look at them in a positive way like this. Oh, how's your leader? Oh, they work so hard. Oh, they're really trying their best. Oh, they're doing, they're positive comments, but they're not positive. Do you know what I mean? Like what it sounds like? It's more passive. Like, oh, they're working really hard. Oh, they put their time in. That is not how good your leader is. That's just the effort they're putting in, right? And a lot of people look at them like that. Oh, they work really hard. Oh, they try so hard, so I can't say anything bad about them. Oh, like, oh yeah, they're doing their best. That is completely different than people who see their head leaders and these head leaders become their role models. Like these guys are this head leader's awesome. Like, they prayed for me for this. They helped me in my faith. And they really, without them, they made such an impact in my life. I want to be that type of person. Those are two completely different things. There are. Because I've heard it. I'm sure I've heard it. People said that about me too. I wasn't fully skilled. I wasn't fully ready to become a head leader. And even, when I asked people about other head leaders too, I've heard that many times. Oh, they work so hard. Oh, they put a lot of time in. Oh, I feel so bad because they rarely sleep. That is not what a good head leader is. Just because they rarely sleep, just because they work so hard, that doesn't mean they're a good head leader, right? It's just kind of being nice because they know that this person's there not because that they're completely the best for the position, but they're working hard and we're so thankful that they're there, right? When it's completely different when someone becomes your role model. Like I'm going to give you an example. Like when I was in Malaysia too, gosh, the way they look up to their head leader, right? And it's not like their lead pastor, it's not like they worship him, but they are so thankful, right? They see all like the things that the leader talks about, the conferences, people are moved and inspired. They want to become better Christians. They want to do things. They want to pray, but like it's so different the way that they look at it, and it'll make a difference. Why? There's going to, look at Christianity, or even look at the church that I was visiting in Malaysia. There are people preparing. There's lineups of people preparing to become pastors. They even had their own seminary in their church. So you have to think about that's completely different where if you want to see a hopeful next generation, you're going to need to get these great leaders that people look up to and say, wow. Like, put it this way. I know that we're the mess that we're going through right now, but let's just pretend it never happened. There's a big difference the way we looked at AJ before, right? And then we look at other pastors, like role model. That's like, wow, this is what you're supposed to be doing kind of thing. Wow, they're so good. They're so this. You want to hang around them. You want to be with them and stuff like that. You want to learn from them. Completely different. And I do think that's something that's going to have to start, right? But it's going to require this is just one of the many methods you can use is setting a timeline and making sure everything happens, everything is for the future. If it's been the same for decades and decades, like province in a lot of countries haven't been there for like decades and decades, but let's just say it's been like that for 10, 15 years. It's always been the same. There is a big difference, right? And I am not. I fully commend everyone who's taken the leadership position because they love this history. And even though it wasn't their number one thing to become a head leader, but they took it because there was no one else, and they really want to see the church and Providence do well. I commend them more than anything else. But the one disadvantage of that, like not one, but one thing that I do think you have to take into consideration is they will not put up with as much as other people. What does that mean? Well, if there's no other choice and they're doing it and they really want to do it well, it's more strict. It's more like you have to do it like this because you're not in it for you weren't there because it was the number one thing that you really, really wanted to do. You know what I mean? Like, let me give you an extreme example. Let's pretend you're in a job that you don't even like. Let's pretend you're in a job you don't even like. If you don't even like that job, you're not going to put up with as much, right? Because you're going to be like, hey, don't you get it? Like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, you're not going to put up with it. Why? Because it's not even the thing you really, really wanted to do, right? And if you look at like the two different types of people leading, yeah, if they were never there for like the absolute number one thing, preparing for like the number two type of leader, then just naturally, because they're doing it out of their own volition and they're doing it because they really, really, really want to do this for the history, right? And there's no one else left. Yeah, it does make it a little bit easier for people to flip. Flip meaning like, they'll get a little bit more agitated or angry or whatever it is when things don't go right. And eventually, they'll step down because it's just too much for them, right? But if you have someone there who's learned, they have the skill set, they understand what they're getting into, it's a completely different way that they handle each and every situation, right? So, yeah, there's just a lot of different things that we have to think about. But if we want to think about, hey, what's the best thing we can do? I do think it is much better to focus on the next generation. And once you get that down, that generation goes up, and then you spend the next 2 to 3 years raising the next generation. You know what I mean? The next generation that comes up later on, right? Because a lot of times, if you're always in that constant situation where there's no one to lead, you want to get these people that are learning and being trained to be put into the department leader positions, to be put into the assistant leader, head leader, IMD, or not IMD, HQ, whatever these positions are. You want them to all get into those positions because they really want to be there, right? Like when I was a head leader in New York too, sometimes we didn't have a campus leader and we had to I had to scrounge around finding someone because no one wanted to do it, right? I had to try to convince people to do it. It wasn't easy to do this. But if you have a constant crop of new leaders constantly coming up, they'll be able to, the church will be able to run in a much, much more efficient, effective, and powerful and inspiring way. So it is something that we have to think about for the entire future. It's not an easy thing. It's not something we could just say, hey, just Pastor Sky said this on the MSD, so why aren't you doing this? It's not that easy. If it was that easy, we would have already done it by now. But it's not. We got to put effort into it. So it's something that I do think that we have to think about very, very carefully. But we have to start thinking about our future much more. Like we got to think very, very clearly. What is our future? I don't think it's an effective leadership to just try to put out fires. That's like a hospital. You just wait for problems, or sometimes there's just so many problems going on. All you're doing is helping people. That is not leadership. I don't think that's leadership at all. Leadership is seeing the big picture, being 10, 15, 20 steps ahead of everyone else and preparing for that future point while you're taking care of the other things that are happening around you, right? So, yeah, lots of things to think about, lot of things to really get our hearts and minds to be wrapped around also, all right? Before we go to first break, I do have a coffee tip for you guys today when it comes to making coffee, good coffee at your home. All right. And there's just like, I would say maybe there's like 3 things you absolutely need, which is you need whole bean coffee, a good grinder. A burr grinder is very, very good because they're known to be good grinders. Whole bean coffee, use a good grinder, and you want good water. Right? So let me kind of go through like a little bit. I'll go a little bit more detailed, but if you want to make good coffee at home, like filtered coffee, number 1 is buy whole bean. Never get ground beans. You have to buy it whole bean. right? Remember to check the roasting date. You want it to be roasted within the last 2-3 days, maximum a week, but it depends how much you actually drink. But I would say 2-3 days max, right? It was roasted in the last 2-3 days. Number 2 is get a good grinder. And of course, later on, you could talk about the details of how coarse or how fine you grind, but you need a good grinder. Third, I would say you would need a proper amount of water, right? Good water, though. What kind of water is best? Filtered water. Do not do distilled. Distilled is not good. Distilled is actually considered too pure. You want filtered water. You want some of the minerals and stuff in there that bring out the flavors of the coffee, right? And of course, you want good water temperature, anywhere from like 195 to 205 degrees Fahrenheit, around there, right? So anywhere around there. But yeah, is it 195, 205 Fahrenheit or Celsius? No, it's Fahrenheit. Definitely Fahrenheit, right? So that's kind of the things that you want to make some good coffee. Of course, like for me, what is the way that I would make a pour over at my house? Number 1, I have good beans, whole beans. I grind them up, and you know, I would weigh them on a scale, and I probably want to get a good amount, like 35 grams of coffee into it. Then I use filtered water, not distilled, and I'd use about 400 grams of water. So it's like 1 to 12 ratio. And then make sure the water temperature is 195 to 205. I'll make a blooming, I'll make sure that all of it is wet. And then I'll pour in my coffee. So like that's kind of the basics what I would do. But of course, there's way more details involved with a pour over or filtered coffee. And I think that's something that you guys have to, you guys can research it. But if there's 3 things you really need is good beans, good grinder, and good water. Those 3 are very, very important, right? All the other stuff, you can research that, but those 3 things are very good. A scale is good, but I wouldn't say that, oh, you have to have a scale, although I do think it'll change the taste. But yeah, those are the 3 things I think you really, really need for a good filtered or pour over coffee. Okay. All right, guys. So yeah, let's get into the first break for the day.
Already said we win and keep on watching now. Already said we win and not just playing around. Defense, offense, that's what life's about. Star player on my team, watch us come back. No limits on the team, sign the contract. Star player put the team on his whole back. Coming from the east to the west, yeah, he did that. So respect that. What you saying? Through struggle, we trained hard, and now we standing on the gold road. It felt so low. Then the starting lineup, defenses get back, intensify, no more time to cry. Yeah, we ran the court and brought back the ring. Somebody on my mind, somebody all the time we like. But we was finished, but we at it again. Screaming like 1,000 years ago, we surely will win. It's time to suit up, yeah, it's game time. He coming back like the 4-5. Eagle has landed, no bird's eye. In the suit tie, he's so fly. It's hip off, now the dreams a lie. Making sure your heart and actions are only aligned. Making sure you're only using just God's design. I perform like this to show you I'm shining bright. We know they watching, so we always gotta be cautious. Put the word on the map, that's the only option. Thinking we exhausted, now it's time we blow past. And we got that second win, so it's time to run it. We running through the defense, penetrating, I ain't never faking. Comeback season coming, yeah, we gonna show you who the greatest. Beat them by a less, I show them there is time for no debate. And at the end, you either mediocre or you be the greatest. What's up? Hey, you think the world is gonna stop us? But wait, the MVP is with us, no bluff. I said, so neat. I'm with my angels like a billion deep. I ball so hard that they can't compete. We only going up, just watch and see. And that's all the lineup, defenses get back, intensify, no more time to cry. Yeah, we ran the court and brought back the ring. Somebody on my mind, somebody all the time we like. Thought we was finished, but we at it again. Screaming like 1,000 years ago, we surely will win. Somebody on my mind, somebody all the time. Somebody on my mind, somebody all the time. Somebody on my mind, somebody all the time. Somebody on my mind, somebody all the time.
right, so let's get into today's word study for the day. And today I want to talk about something really important. I talked about this maybe a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. But I do want to talk to you guys about Bible translations, and there are crazy amounts of them out there. People ask me what is the best translation to go into. So if you know how many different translations there are in English, just English itself, there's over 400 translations, excuse me, of the Bible in English. I think it's like 450. It's something crazy. Okay, and most of the times you're reading the Bible that you were introduced to, because that's basically all you know. Right? And that's like, oh, this is the one I started with. This is the one I'm most comfortable with reading. And that's fine. It's okay. Okay? And, you may, sometimes when you read other, like, different versions and different interpretations, you might feel uncomfortable because it's not what you're used to. And of course, it's such a holy book. And because it's a holy book, you kind of feel like the one that you started with is the one that is right. Right? So, let's take a look at... the one thing you have to understand about the Bible itself, if it's in English, it means that every single version you read is a translation, which means it's not going to be perfect, right? Every version of the Bible is. It doesn't matter what the one your pastor reads. It doesn't matter if it's in Korean or Chinese or whatever it is. They are all translations, right? Even King James Version, it's a translation, right? So, sometimes people think like, oh, this is the exact words that Jesus spoke. How can we listen? How can we read another version of it? No, even that one is a translation. Why? What are the three languages that the Bible's written in? It was Aramaic and Hebrew in the Old Testament and Greek for the New Testament. Right? Those are the original languages where it was originally written and spoken of too. So if you look at like a brief history of Bible translation of Scripture is older than Christianity itself, right? Like look at like the Old Testament scriptures of the Hebrew Bible. They were brought into other common languages for centuries even before Jesus came. And of course, one is the Septuagint, which is the one written into Greek, right? The Old Testament was Jesus's Bible, right? Remember, there was no New Testament back then. Jesus was reading the Old Testament, which was translated also. And, even the modern day Bible that you guys have right now, like the ones that you guys are using, the modern day Bible wasn't even used until 200 years after Jesus' resurrection. That's the modern day Bible we're using. So it's not even at the time of Jesus, right? Remember, when the early Christian church, there was no Bible. It was all straight up Old Testament, right? And if you kind of factor in like the first English translation of the Bible, it didn't even occur until the 14th century. So like 1382 is when the first English translation came out of the Bible, right? So it's really interesting, like, oh, wow. So even the English version is pretty recent. It's within the last like 600 years, right? 1382 was the first English version. That's the first one, right? So what's going to happen is what happens over the last, like, say, 600 years, there's just tons of different translations, but there's translation methods and philosophies of how they translate the Bible. Like I said, it was translated from the original Hebrew, Aramaic, and Greek, right, first, right? Those are the original languages, right? So let's take a look at some of the things. Like, for instance, there's a King James Version and the New American Standard, and these two are the most, like, the best for word, right? So these two, the KJV and the NAS, New American Standard, King James Version, they attempt to take Hebrew and Greek words and translate them into the closest corresponding English words as possible, word for word. Okay? So that's like translating literally, right? While like the probably the most popular version of the Bible that's sold today is the NIV, the New International Version. If you take that one, and there's also like the NLT, like the New Living Translation, they attempt to take the original thought that was being presented in Greek and Hebrew and then express that thought in English, thought for thought. So one is word for word and the other one is thought for thought. So that's why people get the NIV and the NLT, because it's easier to understand. right? And then like those are the two extremes on both sides. And then in the middle, there's a lot of different translations that attempt to meet in the middle between those two different types of methods, right? So it's word for word and thought for thought. And, you know, for me, I grew up with the NIV, and then people would say, no, you can't do that. Oh, you can't. How dare you? It's not the right Bible, whatever it is. There's all these fights about it, right? So when you look at like, let's take a look at some key points. Like first, let's take a look at some key points of like what I just went over right now. So remember, it was Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic. Those are the three languages of the Bible. Hebrew and Aramaic for the Old Testament, Greek in the New Testament. And it was first translated into Latin. Latin first, right? And then, of course, not until like, well, it was translated to Old English, which is like, you know, you're not going to understand anything about that. And that was the 10th century. And then it was the 14th century. That's when we talk about the first English Bible that was translated. And this is a very, very famous theologian, scholar. It's John Wycliffe. John Wycliffe said that, you know, he believed that the Bible belonged to the people of God. And with this conviction, he began to write the Bible in common English, right? And then after Wycliffe, he already had like kind of an out-of-date English translation. There was another guy named William Tyndale. And he wanted to make the Bible readable by even the common Englishman. So by 1526, Tyndale's English New Testament was published, but it was so scandalous at that time that he was arrested and executed. So that's how crazy it was, how hard it was to translate the Bible. Now, after his death, the first complete English translation of the Bible was produced around 1611, right? And then in the years following, then you have like the King James Version first appeared with the final version that is still being used today. And that first King James Version still being used today was made in 1796, which means like 200 plus years ago, right? And of course, during the 20th century, just numerous other English translations have appeared. So that's kind of like the basics of the history of the English translation of the Bible, okay? So there's a way to spot there are differences between different translations. Like for instance, there's King James, the KJV, and then there's also the New King James Version, right? Which is a newer translation, okay? And you'll notice something very interesting. You'll notice that several verses are entirely missing from the newer translations. And people are going to bring this up to you. And when they say, well, your Bible is missing this entire verse or is missing this entire sentence, but do not panic. And you mean, what do you mean? Well, the newer translations are not removing verses from the Bible. And you're like, what? But if you compare the two, it's actually showing that it's missing a complete sentence. Right? And what I want you to understand is, let me give you an example of why it's like this. So let's take a look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 44. Right? We know this verse. In the NIV, it says, but I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Simple, right? What's the King James Version? Same verse, Matthew 5:44. Let's see if it's missing or adding. King James Version is, but I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute you. Like, whoa, those are completely different. NIV is just love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. And this one's like going, do good to them that hate you, pray for them which despitefully use you and persecute. What's the deal, right? But you got to understand, the King James Version was translated mainly from the Latin. Okay? So remember, that means the King James Version is a translation of the translation. So remember, originally it's Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, and it was first translated to Latin, but the King James Version didn't take the original, it took the Latin and translated that. And that's why it's a translation of a translation. And the thing that's interesting about the Latin is, when the Bible was translated into Latin, monks who were translating it added extra phrases. So if you look at the actual original Greek text of Matthew 5:44, it's bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you. That wasn't even in it, in the original text, right? So the thing about the NIV is translating from the original language, while KJV is translating from the translation of Latin, right? So The NIV is just taking out what was added from the Latin translation. Bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you. It didn't even exist in the original script, in the original Bible. And that's why when you hear some of these people say, oh, NIV is terrible, it's missing sentences, this, and this, KJV is better, that's the big point is KJV had phrases added to it, and it was translated from a translation, right? And that's a big deal, right? Now, also, there are going to be several different types of translations too. And why there's so many different English translations? Because the original language of Scripture was already translated into English. Why do we need so many different translations? So here's the two major reasons why there's so many different translations. Number one is the English language is always evolving. So language changes over time. Like, we don't speak Shakespearean English anymore like they did in the past. I mean, most of us don't even understand it. And since the Bible is intended to be read and understood by everyone, new translations are needed, right? So, you're going to look at, like, King James Version is, Psalm 23, very famous passage in the Bible. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name. It's kind of like leadeth, thou, maketh, right? It's very old English, right? And, you got to think about this. King James Version was translated from Old English into a current English translation in 1769. So we're thankful for that, because then imagine we're reading still Old English. It makes no sense. So number one is the reason why we need newer translations and more is because the language is evolving. And the second reason is over time, historians and Bible scholars have discovered more manuscripts to be considered. Right? Which means we're getting more historical documents that come into play. We're like, oh, I didn't know that these existed. And it helps us to understand those scriptures a lot better. Right? So on top of that, our understanding of the original language of scripture is also better than it was before, which leads to better and more accurate translations. Right? And that's why it's important to have these things. I don't want people to be thinking that, oh, you have to read this type of translation. No, it's not like that. Right? So, if you really, like, for instance, if you really want to delve like super deep into scripture, there are several ways you can learn more, right? Like if you went to a Bible translation guide, it'll give you charts that compare the most popular Bible versions according to the translation philosophy, who the audience is, the key verse comparisons, distinctive features. You can go into like a website called the Bible Translation Guide. And, you're going to be able to study like the words of Hebrew and Greek and Aramaic and understand them a little bit better. But in most cases, none of us are doing that type of thing, right? You could also look at a parable Bible too, right? Parallel. Right? And if you look at the technology we have like Bible Gateway, you're going to look at multiple translations at the same time. And it makes it a lot easier. And there's going to be a lot of Bible translation comparison tools also that allows you to search a Bible verse, see the same verse in multiple versions like Bible Gateway, right? And Blue Letter Bible is very, very good one too. But in most cases, none of us are going into that depth of the language and what does each and every word actually mean, right? So my point to you is that, use the Bible that you're comfortable with, and it's okay. Don't let people say to you that that's a bad version of it. Of course, if you're going to go into like the etymology, like what's the original meaning of the word, then I would go to like a King James Version, or I would say North American Standard would be a very, very good one, which is word for word translation. But if you're just trying to read the Bible and understand it, basic to, and in-depth still, yeah, a thought-for-thought Bible is okay with the NIV and the NLT and those Bibles like that. And those ones are fine also, right? Remember, the ultimate goal of these Bible scriptures is for the reader to study the words to grow deeper in your walk with God, right? And that's why having all these translations is fine, and it's okay if you use different versions, right? Don't let people say that, oh, because you did this. Like, there's always going to be a bad point for every translation. There always is, right? But I do hope that you guys don't allow people to bully you into certain types of translations. The one I recommend, I've done it all my life because they say the English in the NIV, the English in the NIV is at the level of 7th grade English. which is good because it means that most people are going to understand it, right? And that's what the key point, at least in the beginning. Maybe later in the future when you're really, really good or could dive even deeper into it, you can go into like buy multiple translations or, use the websites that we have. But like I'm saying, guys, it's okay. NIV is fine. NLT is fine. KJV is fine. The North American, what's the other one that I was talking about at the very beginning? The KJV and the NAS, the New American Standard. Like those are word for word. They're all good. It's going to be a little bit harder when it's word for word. And that's why I do recommend, at least for those who are beginning in faith or don't know the Bible that well, NIV, NLT are pretty good. Like they're thought for thought, right? Anything in between is also okay, but that's what I use. I use an NIV because it's very, very simple and easy. 7th grade English, either way. All right, so that's kind of the Bible translation that I wanted to go over, and hope it's something that helps you guys out also. And if you have any questions, go ahead and leave it in the comments below. Would love to hear what you guys think about this also. All right, so there it is, guys. That is today's word study for today. Hope you guys really enjoyed that. Leave a comment below if you have any questions. So let's move into the second break for the day.
Through all the wind and the trials, still we never did break. It really wasn't very easy to put trust in that state. So even though our castles in the sand tumbled down, but all our tears streamed down together to cement the foundation. The tears would out continuously every single day, and I wouldn't hold it back because I got through so much pain. Now I stand and shake the dust off as I cling onto your Lord who's right before me. Oh Lord, you'll always be the only answer.
I don't sit here wishing happiness will come round. I don't sit and wait for it to walk through my door. Happiness comes to those who take action on love. When I love with perfect faith,
Yeah, perfect faith.
happiness will fill my heart.
When I'm faced with the roadblock, I think, what would you do? Even so, with all that thinking, I fall further in distress and agony. When I leave those thoughts behind, it's a better life. I leave my suffering and failures far behind me. You saw me struggle to chase a brighter future, but running after happiness, I turn to you, our eyes connecting. As you sweat, you flash a smile, and this is what you tell me. Let's create our own happiness, though times it may be difficult.
I don't sit here wishing happiness will come round. I don't sit and wait for it to walk through my door. Happiness comes to those who take action on love. When I love with perfect faith,
Yeah, perfect faith.
happiness will fill my heart. I'm not afraid, Lord, you have always been the answer for me. I'm not afraid, I'll hold your hand in mine.
Those days were once so painful and distressing. The massive waves that tore me down were scary and depressing. But though confusion, chaos, fear devoured me completely, the moment that I found you, I was spared out of the deep sea. Now all those moments in my life, no matter how I struggled, are precious and important cause they led me to our meeting. So now I'll never leave you, know my faith and love will not go cold. And just as you have done for me, I will believe, I will love you more.
As long as I live, I pray only to look to your will. I'll offer prayers full of joy and happiness. I'll stand upon Christ as my rock. As long as I live, I pray only to look to your will. I'll offer prayers full of joy and happiness. I'll stand upon Christ as my rock. Love's always patient and kind. Love is always full of trust. Love is always full of hope. And love always perseveres. Love's always patient and kind. Love is always full of trust. Love is always full of hope. And through love we'll persevere here together.
All right, so let's get into our final segment for today. And today is actually the final segment of Health is Happiness. It's getting really, really busy. A lot of people, they're professional doctors, physiotherapists, and stuff like this. So they are working really hard on this. But this will be the last segment for today. This is Yuen You from Singapore, and she's studying to be a physiotherapist. And she's going to talk about strength training today. So I'm really looking forward to this one because I'm doing strength training almost each and every day. Hope you guys really enjoy this. And those of you guys out there who might have a new idea, we do have an opening for a new segment on Wednesday. So if you're out there, if you want to add to this, go ahead and comment to me or leave me a DM and we can discuss about a new type of program for this too. All right. So everyone, please welcome all the way over from Singapore. This is Yuen You with Health is Happiness.
Hello everyone, my name is Yuen You and I'm from Singapore, currently studying physiotherapy and am in my final year. For today's topic on Health is Happiness segment, I'll be speaking on strengthening training. I'd like to give thanks to the Holy Trinity for this opportunity, as well as Pastor Sky and Julius for this platform. As a disclaimer, this is general health advice. If you have any existing medical conditions or any questions, do seek for professional advice. Firstly, why am I talking about this? Well, in order to have a physically active lifestyle, there are three very important aspects. Firstly, strength exercises to improve muscular fitness. Secondly, cardiovascular or aerobic exercises to improve cardio fitness, also known as heart fitness. And number three, reducing sedentary activity. Today, I'll emphasize more on strength and we'll talk about cardio exercise in a future episode. Then, why talk about strength? Why not just do cardio, right? As we grow older, we naturally will lose muscle mass at approximately 3 to 8% per decade after the age of 30, and this rate of decline increases even more after the age of 60. Loss of muscle mass increases our vulnerability to injury and is accompanied by a progressive increase in fat mass and change in body composition. Wow, who knew that there were such negative effects, right? Also, strength training would therefore help to maintain or increase the amount of muscle we have and avoid this natural decline of muscle mass. One other thing that happens with age is that our bones become more brittle, but strength training can prevent this from occurring. Then, moving on to the how. According to the ACSM guidelines, which are the American Council of Sports Medicine guidelines, the gold standard, the good ones to go by, it is recommended to do strength on at least 2 non-consecutive days of the week. And on each session, to do 8 to 12 repetitions of 8 to 10 different exercises that target major muscle groups. Why 8 to 12 reps? This is the range to aim for the purpose of strengthening. Then for each set of exercise, it is to do it for 1 to 3 sets. And between each set, you can rest for 1 to 2 minutes. Besides strengthening, there are other aspects of training like hypertrophy, which is what many bodybuilders do, endurance, power, which have their own set of recommended reps, sets, and rest time, which I won't delve more into today. A general rule of thumb is that it is always good to work on strengthening for at least a period of 6 to 8 weeks before training other aspects like power. This is because it takes that amount of time for the body to see improvements. However, one can also focus mainly on strength and need not delve into other aspects as mentioned above. Then, how much weight should we carry, like the dumbbells at the gym? It is to aim for a load where you can do between 8 to 12 reps with good form, such that the next rep that you do, you will not be able to maintain good form or you will start to shake a lot. Aim for slow and controlled movements as well, such as when you do a squat, you want to take 1 second to go down, 1,000, and 1 second to come back up into standing, another 1,000. And this would lead to each rep taking up to 2 seconds. For these strengthening exercises, you can either do them with body weight, you can do them with free weights, which includes dumbbells and kettlebells. You can do them with resistance bands, weight machines, or even self-made free weights, such as household items like water bottles, bags filled with books, rice, etc. One question that people may have is when to use free weights and when to use weight machines. Both of them are suitable in strength training, but weight machines are generally easier to use and tend to be more suitable for those starting out with strength training. Using free weights is more suitable for someone who has been doing strength training for a while and has developed their muscular fitness. This is because using free weights is harder and you need to have more control as compared to weight machines. Think about using a leg press machine where you just need to push in one direction versus doing a squat with a barbell where not just pushing off with your legs, but you also need to maintain good form, which is harder to do so. Moving on, I will talk about some examples of a strength program. You can broadly split up the exercises based on lower body, core or back, and upper body exercises. And I'll share some variations as to how you can progress and make them harder. As to how to do them, there are many good resources online, such as YouTube, Instagram, etc. And it will be quite difficult for me to share this through the podcast verbally, but in the future, I personally do want to create an exercise video bank which can demonstrate some of the key ways to perform the exercise correctly. Before doing strength, it is recommended to do some kind of warm-up. For instance, a 5-minute brisk walk, a jog, dynamic stretching, doing some of the exercises that you will do with weights without the weights, just with your body weight. For instance, if later on you're going to do squats, today is leg day, you're going to do squats with the barbells, then as a warm-up, you can do the squats with a lighter weight or just with your own body weight. Doing this would prepare the body to lift heavier weights and reduce the risk of injury. Just like how before you use the car, you need to warm it up for a short period of time. Now, moving on to the exercise and variations. Firstly, for the lower body, you can do things like squats, deadlifts, and lunges. And one instance of variation is that you can start with body weight squats, and if that is too easy, you can carry a weight with you, such as a dumbbell, a barbell, or if you do not have weights, you can also try single leg squats. Then moving on to core and back exercises. For the core, you can do things like crunches, dead bug. Dead bug. So a bug that is dead, that's the name of the exercise. And one other exercise that's really good is called the payloft press. Payloft press. One example of variation is that for crunches, you can start with body weight crunches and then you can hold on to a weight around your chest area. For the back exercises, some examples include Superman back extension, pull-ups, bent over barbell rows. And one instance of variation is you can start with Superman back extensions and then move on to doing pull-ups by jumping up to reach the bar and then slowly lowering yourself. And then move on to pull-ups with the help of a resistance band to make it easier. And then finally moving on to a standard pull-up. Next, for the upper body, some examples for chest exercises is doing push-ups, bench presses. And one example of variation is doing a push-up against the wall first, then doing a push-up on your knees, and then doing the standard push-up where you're only in contact with the ground on your toes and your hands. And to make things even harder, you can put your legs on a elevated surface. Then for the shoulder muscles, one example is doing lateral raises. You can start off with using light weight like 1 kg on each hand and then move on to 2 kg, 3 kg, so on and so forth. And for arm muscles, biceps and tricep muscles specifically, you can do bicep curls, you can do overhead tricep extension, and you can do dips. So from this group of exercises, you can pick 8 to 10 of them to start off with your strength training program. As to when to progress, you want to aim to do the current workload well, and you're able to do 1 to 2 reps more than your desired number on 1 to 2 training sessions. To be safe, if you're starting out, then yes, you can Be able to do the current workload or plus 1 to 2 reps for 2 training sessions before carrying on. The key is to gradually progress and not to do too much too fast, as that is more likely to cause injury. And ways to progress for strengthening is you can increase the reps, increase the amount of weight, reduce the rest time, and do change one variable at each time. During exercise, do monitor how you're feeling. It is normal to have muscle ache, which can go away only in 2 to 5 days, but anything more than that, anything sharp pain, any breathlessness, giddiness, lightheadedness, cold sweats, chest pain, do take a break before you continue, but if it persists, do cease the activity and seek for medical advice. Last but not least, I'll end off with some proverbs on strength exercise. This first one is from a book that Sunsin wrote previously about living a healthy life, and the proverb says, if a person uses his body as it is without training, it will be weak because it is not trained. As a result, even the slightest rise in heat and cold temperatures will result in colds and sickness. It has a hard time because it is so susceptible to the effects of the environment. It becomes anxious and suffers even at the slightest trouble. That is why you must strengthen your physical constitution by training and strengthening your body. The next 2 proverbs come from 2022 November Pre-Dawn Proverbs. The second one says, make yourself and make the environment while enduring countless difficulties. Only then will you gain, enjoy, and live comfortably as much as you have worked hard. Then exactly what to work on? The next proverb says, anyone who has trained and strengthened his body, mind, and spirit will do things to the end and therefore will easily succeed. Therefore, let's all strive to develop ourselves both physically and spiritually. Take care everyone, and we'll meet all of you during the next episode. Goodbye!
And yes, thank you so much, Yuen You, for that wonderful episode of Health is Happiness. And yes, we all need strength training, especially of the older people. Got to get that muscle back in because we're losing more and more each and every year. So I hope that everyone go out, strength train, do the things you need to do. It reminds me, yeah, I got to work out a little bit more harder now, not so lazily. Either way. So everyone have a wonderful and awesome Wednesday. Have a great service tonight. And we'll see you guys again tomorrow on the Morning Star Drive on 117.8.
It's the Morning Star Drive 117.8. You soaring up with sky, now's the time, don't delay. I'm sitting in my ride and it's time to fly. So let's realign, just listen and feel your mind.
I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me when I'm like this. I got my head in the zone, you know. I'm on the Morning Star Drive, you know. I'm burning with desire and the passion. Nobody can stop me